clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power for blood. But this time, Renato was sure he could master it. And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. Renato felt like he was bursting with knowledge. But what kind? Some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people. Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? Give me blood. It was the stone, eager, thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "What's the core?" said the stone anxiously. But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it. The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy, and he had a feeling it did not have his best interests at heart. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Sky Ripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power. He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Renato had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fu school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She told him every secret about herself, except the biggest one. She was the Emperor's daughter. Whispered the stone. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. Are you afraid of it? No, don't be ridiculous. It chuckled. But it's unstable. It will poison you if so much as carry it. And if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically. Renato did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards. The stone became hysterical. No! It's too much power. We'll rip a hole in space and time. He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that.
He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out.
When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent.
"I can't hear you," he sang out, and "You?" It didn't answer.
"Ha!" he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer sailed towards the Nexus, Renato wondered if the core had been created to silence the stone, or even to feed its hunger. Honestly, he didn't care. He felt terrific, and he appreciated the quiet inside his head.
The Nexus was infested with ravens, but that didn't bother Renato. With each death, the converted Iblis stone in his gauntlets glowed brighter, and he felt stronger. Wow. He was getting a bit bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Well, he wasn't one. He was a warrior. They're supposed to be bloodthirsty. Absorbed in the stone was doing its job perfectly. Renato could feel a little eldritch jolt every time he downed a raven, but then it flowed into the glowing stone the way water flows down a riverbed. It all felt perfectly natural, as if all his life, this was what he had been meant to do. Renato tore through the last remaining guards at the outpost like hot coffee through snow. There was a far speaker toad here. He called the council speaker. He knew she would be thrilled, and she was. She wanted him to come back to base. They had plans to discuss, and a medal to give him. A large, golden medal. "Great," said Renato. "Let's talk about who else I can kill." Then the far speaker croaked again.
"Hello, Renato,"
it said.
"If you get sick of slaughtering second-rate birds in the Nexus, I am waiting for you in the mountains."
Zenobia. She missed him. She loved him. Once she saw how awesome he'd become, maybe she'd join him. They'd kiss and well, if she did refuse for some reason, he was no match for him now. Taunting him. No doubt she hoped to lure him into a trap, but it didn't matter, did it? He could fight his way out of any trap. He was invincible. This was gonna be fun. So where was this ambush? Renato couldn't wait. At Sword Fu School, she'd always studied a little harder, practiced a little longer, complained really a lot less. And then she'd become a sorceress. He'd always known he'd have to take her by surprise or not at all. But this would be a surprise indeed. The mountain paths were infested with ravens. That was swell. Every time he cut one down, the stone glowed a little brighter. In fact, everything glowed a little brighter. Look how white the snow was. And how very blue the raven blood was. Seriously, where was she? He wanted to try his new strength against hers.
Renato felt antsy. He'd found a source of great power. But instead of joining with the rebels, he was on a fool's errand the Emperor's daughter had sent him on. The rebels were preparing a last-ditch attack against the Imperial fleet, counting on Renato to show up in time. Would he be too late?
At the end of the path was Zenobia. I thought you were going to ambush me, he said, a little put out. I owe you better than that.
I know how you feel about me, love. You want to join up with me, don't you? You got to admit, we'd make a great team. Of all the arrogant, ham-handed, half-assed, half-witted... Oh, come on. What else are you here for?
That, she said, as a dropship poured a bucket of green liquid on his head. Drowsy gas. You can't stop me with drowsy gas, Zenobia. My power's too strong. Zenobia? Where was she?
When he awoke, he was staring up at the sky. Zenobia looked down at him, brooding.
I probably ought to kill you, but that'd be a bit tawdry, wouldn't it? She was tossing the glowing stone from paw to paw. This is pretty.
Zenobia!
He shouted, and then he fell back into sleep. On the Farfarer, Renato drank his favorite headache remedy. But it did no good. Zenobia had beaten him again. Oh, he really should have listened to the Iblastone in the first place instead of messing around with the core. He had a bad feeling about the upcoming fight, but what kind of hero misses the final battle?
Renato was bruised and tired. He wasn't looking forward to killing ravens. Didn't even seem scary. It felt like a chore, like sweeping the practice room at Swordfoot School, which he'd done his best to leave for Zenobia whenever he could. What would she do with the glowing Iblis stone? That should terrify him, shouldn't it? But he just felt dumb and stupid as he carved his way towards probable doom. Renato had a feeling that was the back door to something. But what?
It was all so unfair. He'd wanted to protect himself, protect the world from the Iblisstone's hunger for blood and souls. And all he'd done is get mugged. Next time he owned a supernatural artifact that wanted tribute, he'd serve it champagne and caviar. Zenobia was cleaning blood off her sword and weeping. "It's so hungry. I can't stop killing," she said. "But I fed it the core of the Sky Ripper, and now it's hungry again." She wept. It was true. The Iblisstone was black again, a void that seemed to suck all the light out of the sky. "Take it from me, Renato, while you still can." "Okay. I'll take it," he said. Yes, he thought. This is what it means to be a hero. To save the soul of even his old enemy when it looked like all was lost. He stepped forward to accept the sword from her outstretched hand. She flipped the sword, and the blade went into his gut. As the Iblisstone sucked his soul into its infinite darkness, he could vaguely hear a voice, something like Zenobia's chuckle. "Sucker." He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again, faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him.
Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor.
Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens?